Now we're going to talk about using arrays and functions. So here's some code that you might recognize. It's actually the code that we saw last week when we were talking about initializing and copying arrays. So this code is, I think, up under the March 28th pre-class reading. So let's just take a look at what we do here. So we initialize a whole bunch of arrays and then we print them all out. And if you look at these loops that print the arrays, they're all pretty much the same format. I have a for loop that goes through from the beginning of the array at index 0 to whatever the maximum index of the array is, and I just see out each element as I go, followed by a space, and then I have a new line at the end of the loop, right? But I do exactly the same procedure for every array. So this is a really good candidate for a function, right? This is something where I could just write the code once and then call a function and not have all of this repeated code clogging up my program, right? It's also going to be a way to kind of make it a little bit more readable and a little bit more modularized. All right, well, so let's think about we know what the main algorithm is going to be. Our function is going to contain a for loop. So let's come down and kind of think about it. We'll write the function first, and then we'll come back and think about what maybe the return type would be. All right, so we know that basically what we want to have happen in our print array function is we want to have a for loop like this, right? Oh, and actually, we want that C out at the end as well. So let's just copy that down here. So this is a for loop that we know prints out an array, right? But this prints out a specific array, right? This A3. So we kind of want to have make this loop more general, right? So we don't want to necessarily hard code here what our loop constant is, and we don't want to necessarily make it specific to one array, right? So we don't want to have a separate function to print each array, right? So what we want to do probably is pass the array that we want to print as a parameter. So let's look at how we use an array parameter in a function. It looks like this. And so we'll use the variable a in here. Right. So you still have the type. You have a name. Oops. You have a name for the array parameter. So here the name of my parameter is a. Then you follow it by empty square brackets, right? So this is an array parameter, and all arrays are passed by reference in C++. So that means that any changes we make to the array in the function will also make changes to whatever actual parameter was passed from the calling function. All right, so we need the array, and usually when we have a function with an array, we also need to send the size as a parameter so that we know where how many locations we have. We know how to control an iteration over that array. So let's just add another parameter called size. We'll say here that's how we're going to control our loop. Right? So we're going to say, okay, I'm going to take an array and the size of the array, and then I'm just going to go through and print out the array. And so let's see, does this function need to return anything? No, not really, right? Because I'm doing all the work here in the body of the function. So what type should I use here? Void. Okay. So I'm not returning anything. I'm just taking an array, the size of the array, using the size to control the for loop that iterates through and prints out each element of the array. Now I'm going to need to also make a prototype for my function, right? Just add a semicolon to the end of the function header. And then I can go through, and everywhere in my function that I have this for loop, I can instead replace it with a call to my print array function. So here, what's the array that I want to print? I want to print array A1, and the size of A1 is little. Here, I want to print array A2, and the size of A2 is big. Here, I want to print array A3, and the size of A3 is 5, right? And then here, one last one, I want to print array A4, and the size of A4 is little. Great. And then we can just go ahead and run this code. And there you go. I've printed all of my functions with a lot less code, and the code that I have is a lot more modularized.